Hi, beautiful souls. This is Sadhana. Welcome to my channel and welcome back to my deck collection series. Today we're going to have a look at about 20 decks that I've pulled out in the category of shadow, and there are many different sorts of decks here that we're going to look at today, and I'll try to group them into categories or subcategories. I think shadow decks have a very special purpose, and they're definitely not for everybody. I think you or your client needs to be ready to do this kind of work. I don't think it's something you're going to throw out on the table with a new person, with a new client, or if you're just beginning this journey. The forte, the strength of these kind of decks is that it begins to get you to look at things in a different way, in a new way, in a deeper way. And sometimes, not sometimes, usually these kind of decks are going to reveal things that you have hesitated to look at before. So they have this real potential for healing and for doing very, very deep work. So the first three we're going to look at are the Margaret Peterson. This one is the Luminous Void, and on the right is the Hidden Waters. And there's something similar about these three decks in that the images, the paintings, the drawings are somewhat obscure. So you have this potential to kind of look within the paintings, and every single person who looks at these is going to see something different. These are not decks for everybody because you have to be of a comfort level to do this kind of work. And I think with this kind of deck, you're going to be doing, with these kinds of decks, you're going to be doing very small spreads, and the readings need to evolve organically. I think that's a really kind of beautiful way to say it. And allow whatever, I would strongly recommend if you are doing this kind of as a soul journey, like a really exploring your subconscious kind of exercise, to not rely on guidebooks, if there is a guidebook for the deck, and to allow the paintings to stir your emotions. The emotions are connected to your subconscious, and that's where this dark, beautiful stuff that needs to be revealed is going to come from. And so if we pull out the guidebooks, then we're using our intellectual mind and not kind of allowing the subconscious to come forth. So I also think there's a little bit of preparation that can really help when you're doing this kind of work, and that is some kind of meditation or simply going for a walk in the forest, making sure, that you're hydrated, you have your journal, you have time, you don't have interruptions, that kind of thing, because this is really, really beautiful work. And something that just came to me is you might want to use a few of these decks in combination because they really kind of pull things out of each other. Like, look at the three cards we have here. Disregard the titles on the cards and just look at the blues. And those blues, the shapes of those blues might be drawing something up and out, a memory or a song or some kind of association. So yeah, so that's kind of the first category. Another way to dive into the subconscious is through another world or through another dimension or through kind of a dream world. And I've got quite a few decks in this category. And the first three here, well, two of them are Patrick Valenza's decks. This is Trionfi della Luna, and this is the Deviant Moon. And then in the center here is the Dark Mansion. And you might not associate, for some people, these might not be shadow decks, but because the artists create this kind of bizarre perception of reality, this bizarre perspective of reality, I think it really can get you thinking. And I don't think any of these decks that we're looking at today should be rushed through. And I'm sure for a lot of you, these decks are just fun. And I get that. But they also have the possibility to dive a little deeper and we can begin to ask questions that we're not going to ask in a more straight up kind of deck. And I absolutely love this 10 of Pentacles and the relationship between the two that are playing the chess game and the servant that is underneath the table holding this bizarre little baby, right? That chess game is so fragile, and all of those possessions that are held can be destroyed in a moment. And for those of you that have, ever experienced that, you know that shadow side of the 10 of Pentacles. This Lover's card in the Dark Mansion it's the shadow side of the Lover's card, and what happens when there is a third party in the relationship. And I think it was really kind of brave of the creators to bring that forth. This Queen of Wands really makes me feel uncomfortable, because normally I would think of a Queen of Wands to be quite assured, self-assured and confident. And this reminds me that even the most confident of people have, a lot of thoughts. They have a lot of stuff going on. And I would expect this kind of voice, this kind of mental chatter to be on perhaps a Queen of Swords, or not even one of the courts. And so it's just a reminder that is always there, and it's always with us, and it's with the strongest of people. This, we don't always have to associate the Three of Swords with death and loss of loved ones, but just having that locket of hair and this locket, it's kind of creepy, and it makes the card challenging to go in another direction. And this Four of Cups here, I love the fact that the figure in the card just, okay, whatever, let's just get rid of that cup. And the cup happens to have blood in it. And we have, it feels more active than a normal Four of Cups. It's like the figure is actually doing something about their emotion. And that speaks volumes to me. And to have a dragon on the Ace of Pentacles reminds me of that sense of clinging with pentacles, and that sense of wanting to accumulate and accumulate. And I know lots of times when we get an Ace of Pentacles, it's like, yeah, okay, my business is going to be better. I'm going to have more money. And that's definitely a shadow side of the Pentacles. This deck has, skeletons in a couple of different decks. And so when we have that kind of bizarre scene, we have to look at judgment in a different way. And I just think that opens up different doors and different conversations that you wouldn't have if you had a beautiful phoenix perhaps on this card. And there's something about this King of Swords. This reminds me very much of the first Harry Potter movie, where we had Voldemort on the back of that professor, and the kind of sense of split personalities and which personality is in control. And this one has blood dripping off it. And why is there a volcano erupting in the background? We have this volcano erupting back here and this somewhat placid scene on this side. So this King of Swords, who you would, or I would normally see as in control of their emotions and in control of their decisions, feels very kind of, volatile here. So I think with any of these decks, you can kind of dive into deeper and more complex questions. Similarly, with these 4 decks, we have an opportunity to be in a completely different dimension, and they are all very, very different. But I think it's a matter of choosing images, choosing dimensions and worlds and places that you feel comfortable walking in. On the left is the wooden tarot. This is the Guardian Tarot, Tarot of the She. This one has been chopped. And this is the Dreaming Way Tarot. So let's have a look at a few of the cards in each of these decks. This Fool card is really, really interesting. And it just kind of takes a darker look at the Fool and the Fool's journey. And a lot of people kind of fear this deck. This Guardian deck has some really creepy pictures, and it has some very equally sweet pictures. And I don't think that any of the decks that I am showing you today are entirely shadow decks. The cards that I'm kind of featuring, or I've pulled to the top of the pile, demonstrate that, but every single deck has cards that don't really fit into the shadow category. They enhance the light. And so that the ones that are better balanced are a more balanced deck. So I think that is something that you might want to do as a survey when you open a new deck, is to actually count how many cards are showing the positive aspect of the card and how many are showing the shadow side, because it's a really kind of lovely exercise. So this Emperor card in Beth's deck in the Guardian Tarot, one of the things that when I look at this Emperor card, so I see the solidity, I see the stone cold kind of emotions of the Emperor. And then there is the kind of the tumultuous waters down below, the waters that represent the subconscious. And so it is they have this airiness of the trees up here. It's a very well balanced card, which shows the balance of the Emperor. But I think if we tend to stereotypically more kind of associate this kind of energy with the Emperor, this allows conversation, to come forth. And this Pan card for the Devil is wrought with conversation. I mean, so much could come up here, depending on what your experience with that kind of mythology is. The Sun card in the Dreamkeepers here by Liz Houston had me asking a lot of questions. It's one of the cards that I pulled out. I thought, wow, this is really, really beautiful. But then it looks more like the man in the moon, and what is the moon doing on the Sun card? And I just found this really very, very thought-provoking for a Sun card. Throughout this deck, she uses lots of masks, and I think that's a really great opportunity to look at the subconscious and ask those kind of questions, like why are different figures, different characters wearing different masks? Like there's an example of another one in the Seven of Swords. And Tarot of the She, it is one, I absolutely love this deck. And a lot of the cards have, like I said, I think it's a very well-balanced deck, but the cards that are shadowy are really shadowy. And I would strongly recommend, like I said before, if you're working with shadow and doing lots of journaling and things, to disregard the titles and the keywords and things, and just have a look at the layers, have a look at what is speaking to you. This card has so many different layers, just the red, the green, the yellow. I don't know how many of you see the third eye here, the Agnya chakra, and what possibly could be blood pouring out of the Agnya chakra. Like this is a deep, deep, deep Ten of Swords, and it's so well done. I think Emily is just, this deck is just brilliant. This Five of Swords was kind of upsetting for me because I tend to think of the Five of Swords has to do with kind of a failure of communication and that kind of thing. And the fact that there's blood dripping here from the tree is really disheartening. So you have to go to a different place, a different level I think throughout the Wooden Tarot, there's lots of really bizarre questions, like why is the heart green? You know, is it toxic? What is growing out of the heart? And we have this kind of purpley red blood dripping off it. And what's the connection with the flower above? This is a deck that it's really kind of cool. I want to show you something. Maybe I'll take the time to show you. So there's lots of headless things as well too, as in the Dreamkeepers Tarot. And here we have the trumpet flower coming out of the head of the bird. The Sun card has that as well too. And lots of symbols in these cards. So if you want to take the time to kind of analyze each of the symbols and see how they fit into the card, I think it's a really nice exercise. And the whole journey of the mycelium, the mushrooms in the bone suit is really something. But I think I put it near the top. I hope. So yeah, so here's an example. I think I put the stones deck right here. And I hope I can fan this out and show you. So, where's my, yeah, okay, so here we have, so it's called God of Stone, God of, for the aces. And as we go through each of the minor suits, the stones in this case, you kind of follow the journey of the stones. And what I mean by that is, like you can write this little story, like there's no crystals in this one here, just the antlers. And it has this, I don't know, I just think it makes for a really, really good storytelling, if that makes any sense to you. And that quality in a shadow deck is really brilliant. I mean, I could have put this in the category with storytelling, but I just think it's really, really well done here. And in that regard, even though this is quite a bizarre deck, I think it has, it would be easy for a variety of people to work with if you were to kind of go that route. This Nine of Cups here, it's really kind of melancholy. And when you think of Nine of Cups as the wish card, as a card of happiness and things like that. So we have the chapel, we have these kind of cheerful colors on the leaves, smile up here in the Guardian. And then we have a crossroads and we have decisions to make. So this card to me kind of speaks of, be careful what you wish for, which is always a good thing to remember in the Nine of Cups. Kind of a scary Seven of Swords. There's a lot going on here. The fact there's a moon in the card and somebody's lurking behind the tree, and it looks a bit, like a nightmare. So any of these decks are really going to provoke people in different ways. I always thought this Ace of Wands is kind of creepy. Her hand gesture, I understand the symbology, the key, the potential for the creativity, having all of the herbs in the background on the shelf. But there was just something kind of creepy about the expression on her face. And so I'm thinking, well, you could create medicine, but you can create a lot of other different things as well. Shadow can be explored in a lot of different ways. And I think when you purchase a deck that has moon in the title, you would expect to be able to use it as a shadow deck, because in the darkness of the moon, in the light of the moon, in the different phases of the moon, we are able to explore, the different phases of our subconscious. And just the fact that when a deck has moon in the title, you would kind of expect that potential from a deck. So I wanted to pull out the Moonchild in this video. This is the Moonchild, which to me is a very, very light moon deck. Generally speaking, most of the cards I feel are quite soft and gentle and easy to explore. So when you're working with shadow, you might not want to dive straight into the darkness. And darkness is what we get in a lot of the remainder of the decks that I'm going to show you today. So this is the Moonchild. This one here is New Era Elements. And here is Dark Angels. And this is the Halloween Tarot. And sometimes I think people pull out these decks or some of these decks for entertainment purposes, and it's kind of fun to have them out at Halloween. It's fun to have them out if you're doing readings at a party and things like that. And that works for sure. And I think that's one of the reasons why I purchased the Halloween Tarot, was to read at Halloween, when I'm doing parties, or I'm working in a public place for an event. It's good to have, a variety of decks in your collection for different purposes. And so, like I said earlier, different decks have different strengths for sure. I was really surprised with Dark Angels when I first cracked it open, because it's actually, there's a few cards in that deck I really, really like. I think they're gorgeous, really beautiful. And same with this deck here. So New Era Elements. I think the reason I purchased it was because the Dalai Lama is on the Hierophant card, and I absolutely love that. But there's lots of very challenging cards in this deck that are hard to look at, and so they are perfect for journaling and deep thought and reflection. And I find that this deck is really good for the person who is an environmentalist, or somebody who is struggling with that, or somebody who's the exact opposite of that, who doesn't have any sort of consciousness around environmentalism. And I think that is a really good potential of this deck. The diversity of cultural challenges that is represented in this deck is really, really something, and I think that is a strength of the deck. But you have to have the right audience, to be able to dive into these conversations. And they are, some of them are less subtle and easier to deal with, but some of them are, right in your face. And this one definitely has a lighter mood. But it doesn't at the same time if you look carefully enough. Like I said, I was hard pressed to find some challenging cards in this deck, in the Moonchild, and I really wanted it to fit into the shadow category, being a moon, or so supposedly moon deck. And I was looking at this Eight of Cups and looking at the large planet behind the mountains, whether it's Jupiter or whatever it is, thinking, that's very looming. It's overwhelming. And is that something I want to move towards? Because usually in a Five of Cups, I'm thinking of, moving in this direction. And anyway, so that had me thinking. And I feel tremendous vulnerability in this Five of Pentacles. And I like the fact that the full moon is there and that she is exposed. And so, yeah, this is one of the cards I think that kind of really fits into that category. And this Eight of Swords, while it's really pretty, and I love the veil and the kind of, well, it could be smoke because she's got a cauldron here, right? But there's this misty, magical element of the Eight of Swords, and I think that invites other conversations as well, too. The Dark Angels deck. So here we have the Ten of Cups. And so in this deck, we have humans and dark angels. And so this is a very kind of special deck for special situations, and you can have some crazy conversations with this deck. Yeah. I purchased this deck because I didn't have anything like this in my collection. And I wanted to spend some time with a deck like this to see how it made me feel, to see what kind of work I could do with it. And I surprisingly found a lot of beauty in the darkness. And maybe that is part of the experience of working with a darker deck, is to not be afraid of the dark. Like the beauty of the dance in the foreground here inside the church is a completely different take on this Five of Pentacles. And I felt, I felt that it was a worthwhile conversation to have with myself. And this Lover's card, we have at least, well, it's hard to say, like perhaps the person in the foreground could be in spirit, but we have a relationship with 4 different figures here, and that we can talk about polyamorous relationships, we can talk about polygamy, we can talk about all kinds of different things, and maybe these are different faces and different shadows of the same person. Because I know when we're looking at the Lover's card, for me, there's this conversation always of bringing in the balance of the whole person, and these not representing 4 people, but these representing one person. And so we have an opportunity with this kind of deck to do that in a completely different way. And yeah, this is a really kitschy, kind of fun Halloweeny deck, but to have the Frankenstein, who is representing the Emperor. And I get that Frankenstein is large and tall and big and strong and that. But also he has been, disfigured and multiple surgeries. And the story of Frankenstein is really kind of sad. And here he's confined in this stone chair with this chain. And, it just feels really not very emperor-like. Right? And then we have a hearse for the chariot. And this star card is anything but hopeful to me. So we have an opportunity to just kind of go in a different direction. The Hierophant is all wrapped up as a mummy. And whether the Hierophant is dead or alive, I don't think that's really an important conversation. But the fact that the restriction of organized religion is represented by this bound figure in the center is really, really interesting. So definitely lots of different ways to work with shadow, right? These decks are like, why would anybody put these decks together? But I just wanted to kind of show the diversity of the possibilities of working with a supposed, shadow deck. Or, like I said, I really encourage you to go to different decks and just do a count of how many shadow cards and how many light cards you have in each deck. I don't know how many of these are a surprise to you to be in this video of shadow decks, but I will just share with you why I think they fit into this category. So on the left is the Dreaming Way Tarot, and I hope I didn't get the names mixed up with the previous deck. The previous one with the word dream in it was the Dreamkeepers Tarot. This is Dreaming Way. This is the Osho Zen, Le Grand Circus and Sideshow, Housewives. And this deck I have heard most often referred to as a kitschy deck. But to tell you the truth, I bought this deck for fun to use at a particular party. And this deck really makes me feel sad. I love the 1950s, the 1960s. There's a few, movies on television, not television. There's a few movies of that era that really speak to me and touched me. One of them was Mona Lisa's Smile. I was such a fan, or am such a fan, of the Bewitched TV series. And I'm sure there's other movies from that era or other TV shows, but this deck just makes me feel sad and almost sick. I'm talking about the Housewives. So I'm going to kind of share that, and maybe that is my own stuff coming up, because like I said, all of you out there in Tarot Tube land may have completely different perceptions of these decks, and may be surprised that they're here in this collection of shadow decks. So here we have this World card, and it's like all of the experiences are on a filing card in a box, and it feels like they're just cards. There have been no experiences. It's just like accumulating and collecting things. And with the World card, I feel that it is this card of joy and celebration. And here I feel like, wow, maybe this family, this person hasn't even stepped away from their neighborhood, and it's just all been a bunch of stamp collecting. And with this Ten of Pentacles, that that excessive monetary association with the Pentacles just sings loud and clear here. This one is kind of, it's funny. We've got this young boy running with scissors, and that's your Page of Swords, but I'll come back to that one perhaps in a moment. In the Grand Circus and Sideshow, we have this kind of reality check with the life of the circus. And I think as a metaphor for other things, or a metaphor for other kind of, occupations where life is really challenging, that 9-to-5 job where things are not quite everything that we dreamed it would be. This deck is a really good metaphor for that. So if people are struggling with their job, this deck is, it's definitely a possibility. And again, a deck that makes me feel very, very sad and move into deep, deep reflection. The Osho Zen I've worked with for a long time, and there's certain cards, there's certain aspects of this deck that just really, really irk me, but over time I've come to appreciate. So to have, and this is not the only deck that does this, but to have the shadow side of the Nine of Cups reflected, I think is important to come back to, right? Because we have that excessiveness of smugness, really, right? What happens if, we get everything we wish for? And rather than making this the wish card, this is the reflection of, be careful. I've said that with another card, be careful what you wish for. But when you do get what you wish for, what are you going to do with it? So I think that's a kind of an important consideration. All of the court cards in the suit of air are really difficult in this deck. So here we have the Knight of Swords, right? So he is struggling with himself, and all, bound up within the armor. And this Five of Rainbows, while it's really kind of pretty, is also equally sad. And the fact that this child feels that sense of lack of freedom, lack of confinement, and the inability to take that lock off, which isn't even locked here, and move out into this opportunity is, I don't know, I feel touched by a lot of these cards. And when they do come up in a reading, they open up very, very deep, deep questions. This is the Dreaming Way. And I really still want to do an interview with the creator of this deck, because I have a lot of questions about this deck and why he chose to have the artist paint the faces of the characters the way that he did, because there's a lot of sad faces in this deck. Like the Queen of Wands is deep in contemplation here, and not at all what I would expect with a Queen of Wands. So yeah, there's very few smiles in this deck. The Empress she has her eyes closed, she's holding her belly. And we get lots of the familiar symbolism, but it's something about the expressions on the faces that has me thinking, in a very different way. And here we have, a similar Nine of Cups, right, in these two decks. And I think that if you're needing to do that kind of a reading, then, that's great. This Ten of Cups kind of imagery also is expressed in a few other decks, which I could have pulled in. There's one card in the Everyday Enchantment Tarot. It might not be in the Ten of Cups, but it has this really kind of similar energy of, yeah, I wanted a family, I wanted 2 kids, I wanted the whole package, I wanted the house with the white picket fence. But have a look at everybody's expression. I think everybody except for this one up here is kind of struggling internally. This Devil card is really quite amazing. And one of the nice things about this deck is the stories are fully expanded and you have an option with a couple of different guidebooks. And I know I said with this kind of deck that I think it's really valuable just to kind of go into the pictures. And for that point, I think I was referring to the kind of decks that are more art-based. But for this one, definitely having the expanded guidebook as well as the guidebook that comes with the deck really gives you an opportunity to look at the experience of the devil in a different way. And here we have the lion that has grown up with the sheep and didn't know that he was a lion. And the story goes on, and then he figures out that he is a lion. And just there's some really beautiful metaphors that come through this deck. So yeah, here we have the Six of Pentacles, and to me this doesn't look like dad. It could be dad, it could be grandpa, it could be a creepy man at the circus, but lots and lots of opportunities to discuss kind of the shadow side of the Six of Pentacles. And this Fool card is just crazy. I mean, she's leaving and she has her handbag here. She still has her rubber gloves on, but as she's leaving, all of these things are flying away and she's leaving them behind. And so, yeah, so that is, it's another way to kind of view the Fool. And I think it opens up conversation depending on who your client is and who you're reading for. And in this deck, there's a lot of alcohol and there's a lot of, if you're uncomfortable in talking about alcoholism or compulsive drinking, I would not recommend this deck because there's a lot of that comes up with the Housewives Tarot. All right, last 3. Can you hang in for 3 more? These decks I would never put together because they're so very, very different, but I think it's kind of effective just to see these decks side by side and just kind of compare and contrast the different kind of decks that are going to bring out different things for different people. So in the center is the Urban Tarot. On the right is the Marielle, and on the left is the Zombie Tarot. This is the same creators as the Housewives Tarot. All right, so let's have a look at a few of these cards. And if you haven't seen this deck, just kind of pause on this Judgment card because it's really quite powerful. You can probably hear Amber underneath me. She's very, very restless today, and even though she had a huge walk this morning, Amber's my dog, in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so that Judgment card is really, really something. And you know, when I pull these decks out, it's like I know I have a lot of work to do, whether I'm working with myself or I'm working with someone else. And I never know what is going to come up or out. And these are the kind of decks where there is a symbol. There's going to be something in the card that I have never seen before. And I think with all of these decks, I hate to compare these three decks because they're so different, but they kind of have that quality of revealing something new every time you have a look at them. And for those of you that are zombie fans and this deck for the zombie fan people, this is not a shadow deck. It's just it's a fun, lighthearted zombie deck. But for those people that aren't fans of zombie, this can kind of work in a different way. So here we have, inside this tower, we have a glimpse of something going on in one of the apartments, and they are completely oblivious to what is going on the outside. And I think it's a great metaphor for the tower. And similarly here in the Ten of Cups, we have this happy family who is oblivious to what's happening over here. And I think even outside of the zombie culture, that this is kind of a very real situation. We have a lot of families and a lot of people who are completely oblivious to what's going on the other side of the fence. And this Temperance is really something here. Okay, so in the center, the Urban Tarot. So here we have the Hermit. We have a homeless person on the street. And what I wanted to share with you with this card here is, that's my dog eating her food. I don't know if you can hear it. Completely distracting me. When I was in India, I've been there a few times, and I remember the first time being with our guide, who was a Brahmin priest. And he spent a lot of time working with us in how to approach and how to be, and the different situations of giving money and food and various things to the homeless people. And I've really taken those experiences with me from that culture, and it's given me a whole new perspective on my reaction to my experience with homeless people as I come in contact with them. And I just kind of see this Hermit card in a completely different light. And if you are somebody who kind of believes that we choose our situations, we choose the lifetimes, we choose our stories and our dramas, each time we incarnate, and that the homeless person has chosen very, very bravely to be in this situation, and we need to be in, really deep respect. I know everybody doesn't believe that, and it's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but if you can kind of wrap your head around that and even consider it, that everybody who is homeless has chosen to be homeless, because it is a very fast way to burn through a lot of karma. And much like the Housewives Tarot, there's this kind of question about alcohol and partying and a lot of addictions as well in this deck, and you may or may not be comfortable, with that. Yeah. The Hacker for the Prince of Swords, I think, is an awesome way to look, of course, at the darker side of the element of air, the suit of air, and what we do with our intellect and what we do with our braininess. And of course, this Three of Swords is just really, really challenging, right? So we're talking about suicide. Here's the razor blade on the side of the bathtub. And this card kind of gets me every time. There's a couple of different ways I see this card, but we have cookies and milk. We have spilt milk. So we can simply just kind of go with that metaphor. So here we have the Four of Cups. and this kind of lack of awareness of the abundance, really. Yeah, there's more I could say about that card, and this star card kind of gives me the creeps. But anyway, there's this light. There is always this hope and this brightness if we are able to, look in the right places. And then, of course, here's the star card in the Marielle. And one of the things about this card that always catches my eye is the holes in the hands and the feet and the forehead. And I just think that the way that she's moving, the coloring of the card, there are, we can deal with the orange colors and things behind that. We can actually go into the Landscapes of the Abyss and pull out some of the things that Mary White has brought forth, but this is a really powerful star card. When I first saw this Two of Wands, I thought that this was supposed to represent a cervix. I love the way that she has described this in her guidebook, but I think this Two of Wands has a lot of potential to bring out of it. And if you are dealing with any kind of fear of the darkness, and we can see the faces of the trees here as well too. They have different expressions on their faces, and we can talk about roots and interconnection, and there's just so many possibilities with every single card in this deck. And I find this Three of Cups really, really powerful. We start, coming from one place, and then we kind of go off on our own journeys, and then we kind of end up all mixed up back together. And this card has lots of other layers as well too, but I think just that in itself is a really important conversation. And if you can remember a card like this when you get a card that has the three dancing ladies, I just think that your experience as a reader can be your experience as a reader, your effect as a reader, your power not power is not the right word. Your ability to share so many different levels is enhanced greatly. And the Marielle, I think, even if it's not a deck that you're going to use with clients, it's a really worthwhile deck to explore as an individual, as an expansion for your work as a reader. I love this Four of Cups card, and we've looked at a couple of Four of Cups, I think, today, and one was in the Urban Tarot. So here we have the Four of Cups here. We have two Four of Cups here, and these gifts that are offered, sometimes they are overlooked, and we forget to see them as gifts because there is so much going on in the background, and there's so much emotion. There's a lot, there's a lot to deal with, and we forget to be grateful. And so I am eternally grateful to these deck creators for probing us this way and for bringing these challenging thoughts and considerations forward, for me, both as a reader and for working with my clients. So thank you for going through these decks with me today. And as always, I look forward to reading your comments and talking with you about these decks afterwards. Stay well, my friends. Namaste.